Welcome to another video where we're going to do simple and compound interest continued. So this part of the unit again is just a bunch of different word problems that are asking you for different things, and you've got to be able to pick out what they are needing from you. So number one says a customer will borrow $12,000 to buy a car. Which loan option would allow the customer to pay the least amount of interest? Okay, great. Now let's identify some things here. They borrowed $12,000 to buy a car, and then it wants to know which loan option would allow the customer to pay the least amount of interest. So I know whatever I'm doing, I'm focusing on the interest. Okay, so because the question didn't exactly tell me what I need to use, this is when I have to go to the answer choices and decide, oh, that is what they wanted me to use. So A says a 4-year loan with a 5.2% annual simple interest rate. And then B says a 5-year loan with a 4.2% annual simple interest rate. A 6-year loan with a 4.7% annual simple interest rate. And then the last one, a 3-year loan with an 8.4 annual simple interest rate. Now, with this, our brains seem to want to always go to the lowest amount of years is always the best. That might not always be true, and I like us to be sure whenever we choose our answers. So we are going to work each one of these out individually, and how we know what to use is this simple interest rate. On your formula charts, you have a formula for simple interest. It is I equals PRT. So see, sometimes you don't even get you don't know what the question's asking you for from the question itself. Sometimes you have to identify these things from the word problem. So with that being said, we are going to do that 4 different times. We're going to have to do it for A, B, C, and D. So I'm going to do A with you. So in question or answer choice A, it says simple interest, so I'm able to write I equals PRT. Now that formula needs a P, an R, and a T. Let's get that information and write it to the side. Our P is our principal, so the amount of money we started with. We started with $12,000. Our rate, now the rate is going to change based on the answer choice. Remember that the rate is always a number over 100, and it's always going to be that percent. So that is why we are not putting down what the rate is, because the rate changes per answer choice. And then we're going to do the same thing for the time. It needs to be in years, because notice each answer choice also is a certain amount of years. So when we're filling these in, we need to make sure that we are doing the stipulations of the problem. So A is still I equals PRT. The principal was the same throughout. It was this $12,000. However, the rate on A is 5.2%. So I cannot write that in the calculator like 5.2. So I'm going to write it as a fraction, 5.2 over 100. And then the time has to be in years, and A says it was a 4-year loan. I'm going to type that into my calculator over here. Make sure you did clear it. 12,000 times 5.2 over 100 times 4. Notice that my calculator looks just like my paper. Hit enter. I get 2,496. Now let's recap real quick what this solves for. Simple interest starts with I. I means interest. The question wanted to know specifically about the interest. So, because that is what this formula solves for, I can stop when I get this answer. I don't need to add to get a total because it doesn't say total, it says interest. We're going to do the same thing on B. I'll do B in a different color. B. B says a 5-year loan with a 4.2% annual simple interest. So again, that I equals PRT. We're going to plug in our numbers. 12,000 is the number that stays the same. However, the rate on this one is 4.2 over 100. And the time is 5 years. Now let's remember, we're trying to pick out the best option. I want you to put yourself in this position. You're going to buy a car and you're going to borrow $12,000. You want to know which one of these 4 options is going to give you the best possible price for you. You don't want to pay that much in interest, so that's what you're trying to figure out, is which one of these will give you the least amount of interest as possible. So now let's type in the next one. 4.2 over 100. Oop. Then we're going to do times 5 years. My paper matches my calculator, and this one is 2,520. And then right off the bat, you can eliminate an answer choice. You want the one that gave you the least amount of interest to have to pay. And as of right now, B cannot be my answer because this number is higher than this number. So then you have to do the process again. We're going to do C. Now I'm going to bring C over here. Perfect. C says simple interest, so I equals PRT. The principal is $12,000 times the rate, 4.7 over 100, times the time, which is 6 years. Let's figure out what that equals. 12,000 times 4.7 over 100 times 6. That is 3,384. And again, you can eliminate an answer choice. So far, B is wrong because it was too big. And again, C is also wrong because it is too big. So I want you to pause the video and I want you to attempt letter D without me. Welcome back. Hopefully you saw that D gave you 3,024. Now, I do understand that the time was the smallest amount of time. However, the interest rate. Guys, this is real world. This is anywhere. If you have a higher interest rate, what that means is that they are taking more money than what you want them to. Whenever you buy a house, whenever you buy a car, the higher the interest rate is, that's the more money that's going to be tacked onto your original total. So yes, you only borrowed $12,000, but the bank wants to make money too. So that's where these interest rates come in, and they tack on that much extra. So we really got to focus on, I understand the time is shorter, but not always is that the best case because the interest rate could be higher. So number 1 was obviously A. Now let's move on to number 2. Ben deposits $1,750 into each of the 2 savings accounts. Account 1 earns 2.75% annual simple interest, and account 2 earns 2.75% interest compounded annually. Ben does not make any additional deposits or withdrawals. Which amount is closest to the difference between the interest Ben will earn in account 1 and the interest Ben will earn in account 2 at the end of 2 years? Okay, whoa. A lot of things going on. So let's go back and let's read what they did. Ben deposits $1,700. Oh, I'm gonna use blue. I'm sorry. $1,750 into each of the two savings accounts. Account 1 earns 2.75% annual simple interest. Account 2 earns 2.75% interest compounded annually. So already right there, those are two different formulas. Account 1 uses I equals PRT, and account 2 uses A equals P times 1 plus R to the power of T. Nothing that I have to memorize. Those are all on your reference charts. And now we get to the question. Ben does not make any additional deposits or withdrawals. Which amount is closest to the difference between the interest Ben will earn in account 1 and the interest Ben will earn in account 2 at the end of 2 years? So I don't know if y'all noticed this, but it kept saying the word interest. This is what I mean by what does the problem want? And in this case, the problem wants interest. They want to know how much more will one account have than the other at the end of this, okay? So no matter which formula I use, I need it to tell me the interest amount. So we have to do this each account separately. So let's do account 1 first. We're going to label that A1. And also, let's identify what formula that's going to use. That account 1 earns 2.75% annual simple interest. That is our I equals PRT. Now, back to the question. The question wants interest. Account 1 uses the simple interest formula, which solves for interest. So when I plug in all these numbers, which is what we're about to do, I don't have to do anything further because, again, I need interest. And this one, in fact, gives me interest, okay? Our principal is $1,750. Our rate is 2.75 over 100. And our time is 2 years. All of that came from the word problem. I'm going to type that in over here. 1,750 times 2.75 over 100. And then times 2. So that number is $96.25. Now, if you're struggling to understand what the problem is asking you for, or let's say you can get what the problem is asking you for because it does say interest, but you don't know what formula solves for what, the easiest way to check yourself is, did you get an amount that's less than what you started with or more than what you started with? In this case, it's less than what you started with, therefore that is an interest amount, meaning that for account 1, I don't have to do anything further. Now let's go over to account 2. Account 2 earns 2.75% interest compounded annually. That is your A equals P times 1 plus R to the power of T. So now with that being said, we have an A. However, we still need interest because that's what the word problem said. Interest and interest. So let's see what happens. We know our principal. $1,750 times 1 plus the rate is still that 2.75 over 100, and the time is still 2. Please make sure you put that time in the exponent position. We're going to type that in. 1,750 times 1 plus 2.75 over 100 to the power of 2. Make sure it matches. I have my formula here. I've got it here. I press enter and I get $1,847.57. Now, again, if you're struggling with understanding, do I have an interest or do I have a total? Is your amount larger than the amount you started with? If your answer is yes, that means that you have an annual total. But our question doesn't need total. Our question needs interest. So this would be the case where to get interest from a total, I would have to subtract the amount of money we initially took out. And that would give me my interest. So I would do that in the calculator. Oh wait, that's a 57, I'm sorry. There we go. So $97.57. Now I want you to notice they did try to trick you over here. If you look at your answer choices, both of those numbers are there. They are there to confuse you because they also threw in another word. And I hope that other word is really popping out at you. It is difference. In class, we would probably go through the discussion of what does difference mean. Difference means subtract. So I want to know which account gives me the better amount and then by how much. So obviously you can tell you've got $97.57. I cannot type, y'all. And then I need to subtract $96.25 and I get $1.32, which is B. So this is how the questions are typically posed. They give you two separate situations, both of them using different pieces of information, different formulas, but you can manipulate the formulas to give you what you need. So those are the types of problems that we see on tests all the time because they're able to put everything in one question. Okay, so number 3, I'm going to read it to you and I would like you to pause the video and attempt it on your own. Number 3 says an employee put $5,000 in a retirement account that offers 9% interest compounded annually. The employee makes no additional deposits or withdrawals. Which amount is closest to the interest the employee will have earned at the end of 5 years? Pause your video and attempt on your own. Welcome back. Hopefully number 3 wasn't too difficult. The first thing was the correct formula. It was compounded annually, which is why we have that A equals P times 1 plus R to the power of T. And then we plugged in our information. They got $5,000 initially that are 9% interest. So I put that 9 over 100 to the power of 5. Then I typed that in my calculator over here. And I got $7,693.12. Now, with this, the question had said, what is the total at the end of 5 years? We would have been able to stop. However, it says what is closest to the interest. Compound interest formula does not solve for interest. And the reason you can prove that is because I ended with a number larger than the one I started with, meaning that they put in that interest for you. So in order for you to find the interest from the total, I have to subtract the amount of money I started with, and that is the interest that accrued over 5 years. And then there is that answer choice D. Number 4, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pause the video and you're going to attempt without me. Holly is taking out a loan in the amount of $10,000. Her choices for the loan are a 4-year loan at a 4% simple interest and a 6-year loan at 5% simple interest. What is the difference in the amount of interest Holly would have to pay for each of these two loans? Pause your video and attempt on your own. Welcome back. I do want to attempt this one on camera, but hopefully you've attempted on your own. So Holly's taken out a loan in the amount of $10,000. And her choices are a 4-year loan at 4% simple interest and a 6-year loan at 5% simple interest. What is the difference? So like we talked about above, difference means to subtract. In the amount of interest Holly would have to pay for each of these two loans. So again, the question, y'all notice how I keep putting these little asterisks and then putting what we need? We need interest. Sometimes it'll say what is the total, and then as you can see it says what is the interest. We just have to know what they need. Now I'm able to do the loans separately. Loan 1, we'll put L1, says that her choices are 4-year loan at 4% simple interest. Well, we like that formula. That's I equals PRT. We're able to plug everything in. Her principal was $10,000 times the rate, which is 4/100, times the time, which is 4. Okay, the reason I didn't write it off to the side is because those things are consistently changing in this. You've got two different loans going on. The only thing that's consistent is the $10,000. So now we're going to type that in, $10,000 times 4/100, that's that percentage rate, times the time, which is 4. And this is $1,600. Now, with that being said, we did get an amount that was less than our starting amount, so that means that we have an interest. Okay, now with that, our question needs interest, and it gave us interest in our formula. So we don't have to add or anything here. It was already done. We can stop and move on to loan 2. Loan 2 says a 6-year loan at 5% simple interest. So again, we're using that simple interest formula. I equals PRT. Our principal is still $10,000 times the rate of 5/100 times the time, which is 6. Gonna come over here, type that in, and if you're wondering why we put it over 100, when you're talking about percents, the best way to think about it is the highest percent you can get on your phone when you charge it is 100. So that is why all percents are out of 100. Even if the percentage is over 100, it will always have a denominator of 100. Always think about that phone battery and that being the highest percentage you can get that phone battery to. Okay? So now I've compared, they look the same, and I get 3,000. So now identifying what that 3,000 stands for, simple interest solves for interest, but let's say we can't remember that. 3,000 is less than 10,000, making that my interest amount. Question 1's interest. Okay, I see 1,600 here. I see 3,000 here, but don't forget, they want to know the difference. I have to also subtract 3,000 minus 1,600. Lucky for you, can do that in your calculator, and I encourage you to use your calculator, and you get $1,400. Answer choice D. So as you can see, these word problems are not, it's not that they're difficult in the mathematical process, it's understanding what they are asking you for. Good luck. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.